Every choice is either a step toward greatness or towards slavery. Marcus Aurelius. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. Masturbation or sexual abstinence? What is truly beneficial? This question has followed humanity for centuries, and even today, it remains one of the most controversial and confusing. Let us begin with masturbation, because this practice is older than most religions, older than written history, rooted in the very biology of humankind. From the earliest cave paintings to ancient myths, traces of solitary sexual acts appear as part of human experience. In ancient civilizations, it was sometimes treated as natural and harmless, but in others, it was surrounded by shame and secrecy. Over time, as society grew more structured, the way people looked at masturbation began to change. What was once an instinctual release slowly turned into a practice burdened with judgment, guilt, and hidden desire. The modern era gave masturbation an entirely new face. The invention of mass pornography, the rise of digital media, and the isolation of individuals in urban life transformed it into something more than a private act. It became an industry, a habit, and for many, a silent addiction. Quick dopamine pleasure became accessible at any moment, without cost, without relationship, without responsibility. And this is where the deeper problem begins. The body was not designed for endless cycles of instant release without purpose. The brain adapts, demands more stimulation, and over time, natural motivation decreases. What could have been a neutral or even healthy practice in moderation turns into a cycle that steals vitality and focus. The price is often invisible. Men who fall into constant masturbation patterns report lower energy, reduced drive, loss of ambition. Relationships lose depth because intimacy is replaced by artificial imagery. Dreams of achieving financial independence, building strong partnerships, or earning respect in the community quietly dissolve in the haze of momentary pleasure. The act itself does not destroy life, but the habit does, because it offers the illusion of fulfillment without the effort of creation. This is why masturbation so easily becomes a barrier on the path to success. It gives just enough satisfaction to make the hunger for real change fade, leaving a person stuck between comfort and emptiness. Still, it would be dishonest to label masturbation only as destructive. There are voices in science and psychology that argue it can relieve stress, improve sleep, and reduce pressure in the body. It can even help some people explore their own sexuality and release tension in safe ways. But these short-term benefits do not cancel the long-term risks of dependency. The critical point lies not in the act itself, but in the intention and awareness behind it. If masturbation is a conscious choice, without guilt, without obsession, it can exist without severe consequences. Yet if it becomes the default answer to loneliness, boredom, or frustration, then it turns into chains that slowly weaken the will. So the first conclusion is this: masturbation is neither a sin nor a miracle cure. It is a tool, but a tool that can be misused very easily. Used without awareness, it drains the very energy that could build a stronger body, a sharper mind, a richer life. It replaces challenge with comfort, vision with distraction, desire with illusion. And if the question is whether it brings real growth, the honest answer is no. Growth requires effort, pain, and discipline. Quick release may calm the moment, but it cannot create transformation. The real danger is not in touching your body, but in losing touch with your deeper purpose. This is why so many men, chasing easy pleasure, wake up years later and realize they traded their potential for a temporary calm. Sexual abstinence has always carried a different meaning than mere denial of pleasure. From the earliest times, it was associated with strength, discipline, and the ability to rise above instinct. In many traditions, abstinence was not about repression, but about redirection of energy. Ancient warriors practiced it to preserve vitality before battle, believing that released energy weakened their courage. Monks and mystics chose it as a doorway into spiritual clarity, teaching that desire channeled inward becomes a force for awakening. Yogic traditions described sexual energy as life force, a fire that could be wasted in moments of indulgence or cultivated to transform body and mind. The message across cultures was similar. By holding back, by refusing immediate release, one could access deeper layers of power that remain hidden when instinct alone is in charge. In modern times, abstinence is no longer tied only to religion or ritual. For many men, it becomes a conscious practice to reclaim their focus in a world designed to scatter attention. The constant availability of pornography, the culture of instant gratification, and the endless scroll of digital distraction leave the nervous system exhausted. Abstinence becomes a counterbalance, a way to break free from cycles of stimulation and recover inner clarity. Those who practice it often report sharper concentration, a sense of strength building inside, and renewed motivation to pursue real goals instead of chasing shadows of pleasure. Hormonal shifts, increased testosterone, and the simple act of resisting immediate gratification train the mind to withstand pressure. This creates not just physical stamina, but a kind of psychological armor against the modern world's addiction to comfort. Yet abstinence is not without its shadows. When used as a badge of superiority or as rigid self-punishment, it can twist into fanaticism. Some men develop tension, irritability, even aggression when they deny themselves without understanding why. Others become obsessed with counting days, turning the practice into another addiction, masked as discipline. In these cases, abstinence loses its original purpose. Instead of bringing freedom, it traps the individual in constant battle with his own impulses. The point of abstinence is not to escape sexuality, but to meet it consciously. When practiced with awareness, it becomes a tool to build resilience, redirect energy, and connect with purpose. When practiced blindly, it becomes another cage, another form of fear disguised as virtue. The real benefit of abstinence appears when a man understands that energy saved is energy available. The drive that would normally dissolve in moments of pleasure becomes fuel for creation, ambition, and growth. Projects that once felt impossible suddenly receive steady attention. Physical strength improves because the body no longer runs in cycles of depletion. Emotional clarity sharpens because the mind is not clouded by constant craving. Relationships can even deepen because intimacy is no longer about escape, but about presence. These are the potential gifts, but they do not appear automatically. They require intention, honesty, and patience. Without these, abstinence is nothing more than restraint. With them, it becomes transformation. So the second conclusion is clear. Sexual abstinence is not a magical solution, but it can be a powerful practice when guided by self-awareness. It is neither the enemy of pleasure nor the holy path of saints. It is a choice to interrupt cycles of dependence, to redirect energy into growth, and to learn the difference between suppression and mastery. The danger lies not in abstinence itself, but in the illusions that surround it. Those who seek quick results will be disappointed, but those willing to embrace the discomfort, to hold tension without breaking, discover that the very energy they once wasted can become the foundation of a stronger, freer life. From a scientific perspective, both masturbation and sexual abstinence reveal complex truths that are far from black and white. On the physical level, masturbation triggers a release of dopamine and other neurochemicals that create a sense of relief and temporary satisfaction. It lowers stress hormones, calms the nervous system, and gives the brain a short-lived sense of reward. Abstinence, on the other hand, often raises baseline levels of testosterone and increases physical energy. The body responds differently when release is delayed, building tension that can translate into heightened motivation, sharper focus, and stronger drive. Both sides are measurable, both have studies that support them, and both can be misinterpreted when taken out of context. The real issue is not in the biology itself, but in how an individual relates to it. Science shows mechanisms, but it does not decide meaning. From a psychological standpoint, the picture is even deeper. Masturbation can easily become a learned coping mechanism, an answer to boredom, stress, or loneliness. When repeated often, it rewires the brain's reward pathways, teaching the mind that quick pleasure is always within reach. Over time, this dulls ambition and weakens resilience against discomfort. Abstinence interrupts this loop, forcing the nervous system to adapt to longer periods of tension without immediate release. The benefit here is not simply hormonal, but psychological. The mind learns discipline, patience, and endurance. Yet abstinence also carries risk, because suppressed impulses do not disappear. They can return in distorted ways: aggression, compulsive thoughts, or hidden shame. Both paths expose the fragility of the human psyche when it comes to desire. The unconscious always finds a way to express what is not integrated, whether through habits, fantasies, or sudden outbursts. Practically speaking, the effects of either choice are felt in everyday life. A man who indulges in frequent release may find himself tired, unfocused, lacking drive to pursue demanding goals. He might struggle with relationships because his intimacy is shaped more by images on a screen than by presence with a real partner. Conversely, a man who practices abstinence with awareness often notices an increase in energy, more consistent mood, and stronger resilience against distraction. However, if abstinence is approached as a rigid rule, it can create tension that affects sleep, concentration, and emotional balance. Science confirms that moderation and self-awareness matter far more than extreme positions. What damages a person is not the act itself, but the unconscious repetition of patterns that steal control away from him. The conflict between masturbation and abstinence in scientific studies often confuses people because results seem contradictory. Some researchers highlight benefits of regular release for prostate health. Others emphasize the hormonal and psychological boost of retention. The truth is, both are valid within specific contexts. What works for one body, one mind, or one season of life may not work for another. The problem arises when someone tries to treat science as a universal answer for a profoundly individual struggle. Numbers and experiments cannot capture the reality of a man wrestling with his own shadow, his own addictions, his own unspoken desires. This is why relying only on data leads to disappointment. Science can explain processes, but it cannot replace the inner work of facing why you seek release in the first place, or why you avoid it. So the third conclusion is this: the debate between masturbation and abstinence cannot be solved by statistics alone. The physical body responds in predictable ways, but the meaning behind those responses is personal and rooted in the psyche. Quick release can relax, but also enslave. Abstinence can strengthen, but also distort. What determines the outcome is not just the biological process, but the level of awareness, honesty, and responsibility a person brings to it. Science provides tools for understanding, but transformation begins when you use that understanding to confront your own patterns instead of hiding behind numbers. When we turn to the depths of psychology, the conversation about masturbation and abstinence moves beyond the physical body and into the hidden architecture of the mind. Freud described libido as the core energy that shapes every aspect of human life, not only sexual acts, but also creativity, ambition, and even the drive to build civilizations. When this energy flows freely and consciously, it nourishes growth. But when it is repressed or released unconsciously, it turns into neurosis, obsession, or self-sabotage. Jung expanded this understanding by showing that sexuality is not only about instinct, but about shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. Masturbation often becomes the outlet for rejected desires, for loneliness, for shame we cannot admit to others. Abstinence, in turn, can become a mask of control, a way to deny the shadow and pretend it is gone. In both cases, what is avoided in the conscious mind returns through the unconscious, shaping life in hidden ways. The shadow does not disappear when ignored. A man who compulsively masturbates is not simply satisfying a need, he is feeding an exiled part of himself, a wound he cannot look at directly. The brief release covers the pain, but the pain grows stronger in silence. On the other side, a man who rigidly abstains may claim superiority, but beneath the surface, his shadow grows restless, building pressure that can erupt in destructive forms. The paradox is painful but real. Both indulgence and denial can serve as escapes. Masturbation is escape into comfort. Abstinence can be escape into pride. Neither path leads to wholeness unless the hidden forces within are acknowledged and integrated. The unconscious communicates through symbols, dreams, compulsions, and repetitive patterns. This is why so many men find themselves trapped in cycles they consciously despise. They swear to stop, they try to control, yet something pulls them back. It is not weakness in the ordinary sense, it is the psyche demanding recognition. The sexual act becomes a battlefield between the ego, which seeks to appear in control, and the shadow, which insists on expression. Healing begins not with fighting, but with listening. To sit with the discomfort, to admit the craving without judgment, to trace it back to its roots: loneliness, rejection, fear of intimacy, unresolved childhood wounds. Only then can the energy behind the act transform from destructive compulsion into creative force. This is the essence of depth psychology. The problem is never the surface behavior. The problem is the unconscious meaning that behavior carries. Masturbation is not the enemy. Abstinence is not the savior. Both are mirrors, reflecting what lies unintegrated within. A man who sees masturbation only as evil will fight a war against himself. A man who worships abstinence as pure will fall into repression. But a man who dares to face his shadow begins to realize that energy is neutral. What matters is whether it is scattered in unconscious repetition or gathered in conscious creation. To face the shadow is terrifying because it means admitting the parts of yourself you hope to bury forever. Yet this confrontation is the threshold of transformation. So the fourth conclusion becomes clear. The true challenge is not to choose between masturbation or abstinence, but to integrate the shadow that gives rise to both. Without integration, masturbation remains an addiction, and abstinence becomes repression. With integration, either practice can be approached consciously, without illusion, without self-deception. The energy of desire, once owned rather than denied, becomes a source of power. The shadow, once embraced, ceases to sabotage from the dark and begins to serve as an ally. This is the turning point where sexual energy ceases to rule the man and instead becomes the foundation for his freedom. Male and female psychology approach sexuality from very different angles, yet both carry wounds, cultural imprints, and unconscious patterns that shape how masturbation and abstinence are experienced. For men, sexuality is often tied directly to performance, achievement, and proof of worth. From early childhood, many boys are taught that their value is linked to strength, dominance, and ability to control urges. Masturbation becomes both a forbidden act and a secret relief, creating a double bind of shame and desire. When this continues into adulthood, a man may find himself caught between the pressure to suppress and the compulsion to indulge, never truly free in either direction. Abstinence, for him, can feel like reclaiming lost strength, but it can just as easily become another way to measure his masculinity, turning inner work into a competition. For women, the story has been historically shaped by silence and repression. Female sexuality was denied, shamed, or controlled for centuries, leaving deep scars in the collective psyche. While men were warned about lust and temptation, women were often forbidden from even acknowledging desire. In this context, masturbation for women carried even heavier layers of secrecy, guilt, and cultural taboo. Today, as these barriers begin to break, many women struggle between newfound freedom and old patterns of self-denial. Abstinence, in the female experience, is rarely about power alone. It often carries echoes of suppression, religious control, or trauma. Yet when embraced consciously, it can also give women a profound sense of sovereignty over their own bodies, a way to separate genuine choice from cultural programming. Both male and female psychologies reveal how family systems and early conditioning shape sexuality. Parents who avoid honest conversations about desire pass on shame and confusion. Communities that demonize sexuality create generations that swing between excess and repression. Many men discover their patterns of compulsive release are not just habits, but inherited echoes of fathers and grandfathers who also sought escape from loneliness or frustration. Many women realize their fear of desire or discomfort with intimacy comes from mothers and grandmothers who carried silence as survival. These family programs live inside the unconscious, and unless they are seen, they continue to dictate choices. Masturbation then becomes not a personal act, but a reenactment of generational wounds. Abstinence becomes not conscious mastery, but an inherited cage. The deeper we look, the more we see that sexuality is not a private matter in isolation, but part of the collective unconscious. Archetypes influence how men and women live their desires. The warrior who channels energy into conquest, the lover who longs for union, the maiden who fears judgment, the mother who suppresses her needs for care of others. Each of these patterns influences how energy is expressed or withheld. Masturbation may serve the archetype of the lonely wanderer who cannot find connection, while abstinence may feed the archetype of the ascetic sage who seeks transcendence. Neither archetype is inherently wrong, but both can imprison if lived unconsciously. The real task is to step outside the inherited roles and recognize desire as personal energy that belongs to you, not to culture, religion, or family. So the fifth conclusion emerges. Male and female psychologies carry different stories, but the core challenge is the same: breaking free from unconscious programs that distort sexual energy. Masturbation and abstinence are not just personal habits, they are expressions of cultural, familial, and archetypal forces moving through us. The freedom begins when a man or woman can ask, not, "Is this right or wrong?" but "Is this truly my choice?" Without that question, both indulgence and denial remain chains. With it, sexuality becomes a ground for self-knowledge, where energy is no longer wasted on repeating inherited wounds, but directed toward building a life that reflects authentic desire and conscious responsibility. Practical tools for working with sexual energy begin with awareness rather than control. Most people who struggle with masturbation or strict abstinence are caught in unconscious patterns, acting out habits without ever stopping to witness what is actually happening inside them. The first step is to observe honestly when the impulse arises, what emotions surround it, and what situations trigger it. Often, it is not pure desire, but loneliness, stress, or boredom seeking release. Keeping a journal of these moments can bring surprising clarity, showing that what feels like uncontrollable instinct is often a response to unresolved pain. This is not about judgment, but about seeing reality without disguise. Once the pattern is visible, the grip begins to loosen. Another tool is redirecting energy through the body. Breathwork, physical training, or creative activity can transform the raw charge of sexual tension into fuel for growth. Instead of forcing suppression, the practice is to move the energy upward or outward into constructive channels. Athletes, artists, and leaders throughout history have spoken about using sexual energy as inspiration for achievement. The body does not demand release only in one form. It can be guided, shaped, and expressed in countless ways. When a man feels the urge to relapse into old habits, choosing to run, to create, or to face a challenging task can shift the same energy into something lasting. Over time, this builds not just self-control, but a new relationship with desire, one that does not reduce it to quick comfort. Meditation and shadow work are equally important. Sitting in silence with the discomfort of craving allows the unconscious to surface. Instead of reacting immediately, a man can ask, "What am I really seeking right now?" Is it intimacy, validation, escape from stress? Shadow work invites you to write, reflect, and even dialogue with the part of yourself that demands release. By giving the shadow a voice, you reduce its power to sabotage. This process transforms abstinence from a fight into an exploration. It turns masturbation from a guilty secret into a doorway of understanding. The practice is not about denying energy, but about meeting it directly, without fear. It is also essential to remove illusions of quick results. Many men begin abstinence expecting instant superpowers, strength, charisma, financial success. While discipline may bring improvements, these gifts are not automatic. They emerge gradually as energy is consistently redirected into meaningful action. The man who expects shortcuts only repeats the same cycle of instant gratification, just wearing a different mask. True transformation comes through patience, consistent practice, and the courage to endure discomfort without escape. The most practical advice is simple but difficult. Accept the struggle as part of growth. Do not chase perfection. Do not cling to streaks or numbers. Focus on honesty with yourself and the willingness to use each failure as information rather than as shame. So the sixth conclusion is this: the most useful tools are not extreme rules, but conscious practices that build relationship with sexual energy. Journaling reveals patterns, breathwork and movement redirect impulses. Meditation uncovers hidden motives, and shadow work integrates the rejected parts of self. None of these promise an easy path, but together they create a foundation where energy is no longer wasted in cycles of indulgence or repression. Instead, it becomes fuel for discipline, creativity, and authentic presence. The work is ongoing, uncomfortable, and never finished, but it is in this very process that strength is born. The final truth is simple: neither masturbation nor abstinence is the ultimate answer. Both can give temporary relief or temporary strength, but both can also become traps when lived unconsciously. The real danger lies in dependency, when a habit begins to quietly steal energy, clarity, and purpose. Masturbation may seem harmless, but repeated as an escape, it drains life, replacing potential with illusion. Abstinence may seem powerful, but practiced as rigid denial, it breeds tension and pride. The choice is always yours: to waste energy on cycles that lead nowhere, or to direct it toward building something lasting, something that leaves a mark beyond comfort. If these words resonate with you, subscribe to the channel. More people need to hear the truths that are often hidden behind silence. Join the Telegram community, where we go even deeper and support those ready for honesty. Consider becoming a sponsor so we can continue creating work that challenges illusions instead of selling comfort. And finally, leave a comment. If you recognize yourself in this journey, write, "I accept my shadow." Let us see how many here are ready to stop running from themselves and start turning pain into strength. This is only the beginning.